In today's video, we're digging into one of the wildest leaks to hit Trump's legal team this week. A reporter has just published private, unsolicited text messages from the prosecutor personally chosen by Trump, and what he said about New York Attorney General Letitia James is shocking. These texts could expose cracks inside Trump's own defense strategy, and possibly change the direction of the entire case. Stay with me, because we're breaking down exactly what was leaked, and why this story is blowing up across the U.S. right now.
As James Comey's attorneys are arguing that Lindsay Halligan was improperly appointed to her role, Trump's handpicked U.S. attorney in Virginia is attracting scrutiny for another reason. Lindsay Halligan reportedly spent some 33 hours on and off during a recent weekend texting with a reporter. Not in regards to Comey's case, but that of another one of the president's targets, New York Attorney General Letitia James. It was reporting on that case that kickstarted this back and forth that you're about to see. Let me explain. Anna Bower is a senior editor for the nonprofit publication Lawfare. She recently posted about a New York Times story concerning the case that was being made against the New York Attorney General, and Halligan is the person, of course, who presented that case to the grand jury. Less than an hour after Bower posted about it, Halligan messaged her directly on the encrypted app Signal that reporters often use. And according to Bower, Lindsay Halligan wrote, quote, "Anna, Lindsay Halligan here. You're reporting things that are simply not true. Thought you should have a heads up." What followed that initial text was more than a day of text insisting that the reporting from the New York Times was inaccurate. Now, Bower hadn't reported that, but because she had repeated it online, Halligan was going back and forth with her on the merits of that reporting. Then, after a few hours, Halligan wrote, "By the way, everything I ever sent you is off record. You're not a journalist, so it's weird saying that, but just letting you know." Bower responded, quote, "I'm sorry, but that's not how this works. You don't get to say that in retrospect." She then tonight posted the entire text chain to Lawfare, and Anna Bower is my source here tonight. And thank you so much, Anna, for being here, because I'll tell you, I know a lot of Trump people who were sending this story around when they first saw it. I just wonder, what was your reaction when Lindsay Halligan first reached out to you?
Yeah, I was really surprised, and honestly, I was very curious to hear what she had to say. For some background, Caitlin, I did not have a pre-existing relationship with Lindsay Halligan in terms of speaking to her as a reporter. We had met one time many years previous while I was reporting on Trump's criminal investigations and criminal cases. She was on that criminal defense team, but other than that, she was very much a stranger to me, essentially. So when I learned that she actually was texting me, or I suspected that it really was Lindsay Halligan, I was interested to hear what she had to say. I report on the cases that she is prosecuting, and so I was curious, but it seemed like mostly what she wanted to talk to me about was a tweet that I wrote that summarized the New York Times reporting concerning certain grand jury testimony in the Letitia James case. And I think that's what really struck me as so surprising, is that, it's very much not often that you see a sitting United States attorney who unsolicited reaches out to a reporter to talk about something that relates to an ongoing prosecution, that relates to grand jury testimony potentially, because those are the kinds of things that there's policies, there's laws that prohibit disclosure about that kind of information. So while I don't think it's very unusual to have a prosecutor reach out about that subject matter, I did find it really strange, and especially considering we didn't have a pre-existing reporter-source relationship.
Yeah, because obviously reporters are trying to, reach out to people all the time, talk to them, get context, obviously to make sure reporting is accurate and fair. But because you were contacted out of the blue, I imagine you were a little bit suspicious of whether it was even actually her at the beginning.
Yeah, and there were a few things that we did to confirm that it was actually her. So one thing is, as I mentioned, we had previously met one time several years before. She was able to answer questions that suggested to me it likely was Lindsay Halligan, because she was able to say where we first met and who she was with. And then we later were able to obtain her phone number, which then connected to the existing conversation that we had. And then finally, right before we went to publication, we reached out for comment through the Public Affairs Office at the Department of Justice. They confirmed that that these were text messages with Lindsay Halligan. And right before we were about to publish, she also additionally reached out to me again. And as you mentioned, claimed that our conversation was off the record. Caitlin, I would encourage people to read the text messages that we published, and they can decide for themselves. But Lindsay Halligan never once suggested that we were off the record. She had reached out to me. You know as well as I do, Caitlin, in dealing with speaking to sources, that the way that it works is there's an agreement, there's a conversation that is had about it. And I never agreed to speak off the record. She never suggested it. I would have been happy to speak with her off the record had she suggested it, but she did not do that here. So I was very surprised when she, suddenly suggested that things were off the record when they in fact were not.
Yeah, generally that's something you agreed to before the proposed conversation takes place with someone who wants it, to keep it off the record. And, you mentioned that you reached out to the Justice Department. They accused you of trying to tattletale on Lindsay Halligan tonight. I want to read their statement in full, because they said, quote, "You clearly didn't get the response you wanted, which was information handed over to you without having to dig into the facts of the case to craft a truthful story. So you thought you'd tattletale to Main Justice. Lindsay Halligan was attempting to point you to facts, not gossip, but when clarifying that she would adhere to the rules of the law and not disclose grand jury information, you threatened to leak an entire conversation. Good luck ever getting anyone to talk to you when you publish their text." I read it. I don't think you're threatening to leak it. I just think, to your point, it wasn't an off-the-record conversation.
No, it wasn't. And look, I reached out. I didn't threaten anything. I reached out for comment because I'm a journalist who is publishing a story. And I want to underscore here that why we thought that this was a newsworthy story and why there's great public interest in this is, I'm a legal reporter. I cover the Justice Department. So does everyone in our organization. We're familiar with how things work in terms of reporter and U.S. attorney relationships and reporter and prosecutor relationships. When this exchange happened, it felt so out of the ordinary and so unusual that, it felt like something that really should be published, because here you have someone who is already so highly scrutinized under such pressure with these very high profile prosecutions and already knows that, anything that she does is going to be picked apart by defense counsel, even the most minor misstep. And yet here she is on the record messaging with a reporter about an ongoing prosecution, which just does not really happen that much in terms of communications between reporters and prosecutors. And so we found it to be really remarkable. And over the past few days, we spoke to reporters who cover legal affairs. We spoke to former prosecutors. They have never quite seen an exchange like this, Caitlin. And so I think that, it felt like something that we needed to publish, and we did. And there was nothing in terms of leaking anything. It was Lindsay Halligan who approached me. I think that would be my response to that.
Anna Bauer, thank you for joining us tonight.